The USS Defiance dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system, its massive hull gleaming under the light of twin suns. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge watching the tactical display as Imperial sensors began detecting their arrival. The element of surprise would only last for a few minutes before the entire system knew they were there. "Kepler Station is exactly where our intelligence said it would be," reported Amy Foster from her sensor station. "I'm reading heavy defensive platforms and at least 20 Imperial ships docked for refueling." Morrison nodded as he studied the enemy positions. The space station was enormous, easily 10 times larger than anything humanity had ever built. Massive fuel tanks and ammunition storage facilities surrounded the central docking complex, where Imperial warships came to resupply between missions. "Any sign of our allies?" Morrison asked. "Zilani ships are moving into position throughout the system," Commander Lisa Rodriguez replied from the tactical station. "Captain Zara reports that evacuation teams are standing by to rescue the slave workers." Morrison felt the familiar weight of command settling on his shoulders. This operation would either cripple the Imperial Third Fleet or result in the destruction of the last human ship in the galaxy. There was no middle ground when fighting an empire that had ruled unchallenged for 2,000 years. "Begin the evacuation," Morrison ordered. "We move fast and we hit them hard." Small Zilani ships darted toward the space station from multiple directions, using their speed and maneuverability to avoid the Imperial defense platforms. Morrison watched as the resistance fighters carried out their part of the plan with practiced efficiency. These beings had been fighting this war for decades, and it showed in every precise movement. "Imperial ships are powering up," Rodriguez announced. "They're launching fighters and moving to intercept our allies." Morrison had expected this response. The Empire's military doctrine emphasized overwhelming force and rapid response to any threat. They would throw everything they had at the raiders, leaving their station vulnerable to the Defiance's attack. "Take us in," Morrison ordered. "Target the main fuel storage tanks." The human battleship accelerated toward the space station, its weapons charging as it closed the distance. Imperial defense platforms opened fire with massive energy beams, but their attacks scattered harmlessly against the Defiance's shields. The Empire's weapons were still designed for fighting other energy-based vessels, launching missiles, Rodriguez announced. Full spread, targeted on critical infrastructure. A cloud of human missiles streaked toward the space station, each one guided by advanced targeting systems that the Empire had never encountered. The Imperial point defense tried to intercept them with energy beams, but the missiles were designed to survive such attacks. The first explosions lit up space as the missiles found their targets. Fuel storage tanks erupted in brilliant fireballs that consumed entire sections of the station. Secondary explosions rippled through the complex as the fire spread to ammunition depots and equipment storage areas. "Direct hits on all primary targets," Foster reported. "The station's main fuel reserves are completely destroyed." Morrison watched as the massive space station began to break apart under the force of the explosions. Decades of Imperial logistics infrastructure were being erased in a matter of minutes. The Third Fleet would not be able to operate in this sector without their primary supply base. "Captain, we're receiving multiple distress signals," the communications officer announced. "The Zilani have successfully evacuated over 3,000 slave workers from the station." Morrison felt a surge of satisfaction. They had struck a major blow against the Empire while saving thousands of innocent lives. The operation was succeeding beyond their most optimistic projections. "Imperial reinforcements arriving," Rodriguez warned. 50 ships dropping out of hyperspace at the system's edge. Morrison had known this moment would come. The Empire's response to the raid would be swift and overwhelming. The Defiance needed to complete its mission and escape before the reinforcements could trap them in the system. "All Zilani ships, begin withdrawal," Morrison ordered over the communication channel. "We've accomplished our objective." The human battleship turned away from the burning wreckage of Kepler Station as Imperial reinforcements raced across the system. The Empire's ships moved in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the confidence of a military that had never known defeat. "They're trying to cut off our escape route," Ben Clark reported from the navigation station. "We'll have to fight our way out." Morrison had anticipated this possibility. The Empire would not let such a devastating attack go unpunished. They would throw everything they had at the Defiance, regardless of the cost. "All hands, prepare for combat," Morrison announced over the ship's intercom. "This is going to be our biggest fight yet." The Imperial fleet opened fire as soon as the human ship came within range. Energy beams filled space with deadly light, as hundreds of alien weapons focused their attacks on the Defiance. The human shields flared bright blue as they absorbed the massive energy discharge. "Shield strength holding at 60%, Rodriguez reported. "But they're learning to concentrate their fire." Morrison watched as the Empire adapted their tactics once again. They were quick learners, and each battle taught them more about fighting human technology. The Defiance's advantages would not last forever. "Return fire," Morrison ordered. "Show them what happens when they underestimate humanity." The human battleship's weapons spoke with thunderous authority. Kinetic projectiles carved through the Imperial formation while missiles streaked toward their targets with relentless determination. Enemy ships exploded in brilliant flashes as human firepower overwhelmed their defenses. "We're breaking through their formation," Clark announced. "Clear path to the hyperspace jump point." Morrison felt the deck shake under his feet as the Defiance powered through the Imperial fleet. The enemy ships scattered before the human vessel's charge, their perfect coordination broken by the sheer audacity of the attack. "Jump to hyperspace," Morrison ordered as they cleared the enemy formation. The USS Defiance vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind the burning wreckage of the Empire's most important supply depot. Word of the victory would spread throughout the galaxy, inspiring resistance movements on dozens of worlds. Morrison stood on the bridge looking out at the swirling energies of hyperspace. They had won their first major victory against the Galactic Empire, but he knew this was only the beginning. The Empire would not rest until the human ship was destroyed, and the Defiance would have to keep fighting until freedom was restored to the galaxy. The last human battleship had become something more than a refugee vessel. It was now the flagship of a galactic rebellion that would reshape the balance of power among the stars. The USS Defiance drifted in the shadow of a massive asteroid, while repair crews worked frantically to fix the damage from their escape. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the ship's main conference room, facing a holographic projection of Captain Zara, the Zelani resistance leader, who had helped them break free from the Imperial fleet. Zara's appearance was striking, even through the flickering hologram. Her skin had a blue-green tint that reminded Morrison of Earth's oceans, and her large eyes held the wisdom of someone who had fought a long war against impossible odds. Behind her, Morrison could see the cramped bridge of a ship that had clearly seen better days. "Your vessel is unlike anything we have encountered," Zara said, her English improving with each conversation. "The Empire's energy weapons barely scratched your hull, and your projectile weapons cut through their shields like they were made of paper." Morrison nodded grimly. "We've been fighting for survival for 3 years. Our ship was built for war, but we never expected to find ourselves in the middle of someone else's conflict." "This is not someone else's conflict," Zara replied firmly. "The Empire considers all life in this galaxy to be their property. Your arrival has already marked you as enemies. They will not stop hunting you until you are dead or enslaved." Dr. Helen Park leaned forward from her seat at the conference table. "How many species are part of this empire?" "The Vorthic rule over 47 different worlds," Zara answered. "Some joined willingly, seeking protection and prosperity. Others were conquered and forced to submit. My people, the Zelani, have been fighting for our freedom for over 30 years. Commander Lisa Rodriguez studied the tactical data they had gathered during the battle. "Their fleet coordination is impressive, but their individual ship designs seem focused on energy-based combat. They don't appear to have much experience with kinetic weapons." "That is correct," Zara confirmed. "For 2,000 years, the Empire has dominated this region of space. They have faced no serious challenges to their rule, so their military doctrine has remained unchanged. Your weapons and tactics are completely foreign to them. Morrison felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. 8,000 human lives depended on his decisions, but he was beginning to realize that their actions could affect millions of other beings throughout the galaxy. The Empire's reaction to the Defiance's arrival would determine the fate of every resistance movement in the region. "What do you need from us?" Morrison asked. Zara's expression brightened with hope. "The Empire maintains supply depots throughout this sector. Their ships require regular refueling and maintenance, just like ours. If we could strike at these facilities, we could severely hamper their ability to maintain their fleets." "You're talking about guerrilla warfare," Morrison realized. "Hit-and-run attacks against their infrastructure." "Exactly," Zara replied. "Your ship is fast enough to strike and escape before they can respond in force. Each successful raid would inspire other resistance groups to take action." Morrison looked around the conference table at his senior staff. These people had followed him across the galaxy, trusting him to lead them to safety. Now he was asking them to risk everything for strangers they had just met. "What about our mission to find a new home?" asked Ben Clark. "We still have 8,000 civilians to think about." "The Empire will never allow you to settle in this region," Zara pointed out. "They view all non-imperial colonies as threats to their authority. Your only choice is to fight or to keep running forever." Morrison stood up and walked to the viewport where he could see the stars of this strange galaxy. Somewhere out there, the Imperial fleet was regrouping and planning their next attack. The Defiance could run, but Zara was right. They would never be safe as long as the Empire existed. "Show me these supply depots," Morrison said finally. The next few hours were spent in detailed planning. Zara provided intelligence on Imperial logistics networks that her people had gathered over decades of resistance fighting. The Empire's confidence in their own superiority had made them careless about protecting their supply lines. "The depot at Kepler Station is their largest facility in this sector," Zara explained, highlighting a star system on the tactical display. "It supplies fuel and ammunition to over 50 Imperial ships. If we could destroy it, the entire third fleet would be crippled." Morrison studied the defensive layout of the station. It was heavily armed, but designed to repel attacks by conventional rebel ships. The Empire had never faced anything like the Defiance's firepower. "How many civilians work at the station?" Morrison asked. "Most of the workers are slaves taken from conquered worlds," Zara replied. "The Empire uses forced labor for most of their industrial operations." Morrison felt his anger rising. The more he learned about the Empire, the more he understood why so many species were willing to fight against them. The Vorthak had built their civilization on the suffering of others. "We'll need to evacuate the workers before we attack," Morrison decided. "I won't be responsible for killing innocent people." Zara looked surprised. "That will make the operation much more complex. The Empire will detect the evacuation and reinforce the station. Then we'll have to work fast," Morrison replied. "But we do this right, or we don't do it at all." The planning continued late into the night. Tony Williams worked with Zolani engineers to understand Imperial technology, while Amy Foster coordinated with resistance intelligence networks throughout the sector. The attack on Kepler Station would be the first joint operation between humans and the galaxy's freedom fighters. As Morrison prepared to leave the conference room, Zara's hologram flickered and stabilized. "Captain, there is something else you should know. Word of your arrival has already spread to other resistance groups. They are calling you the Liberators, the ones who will free the galaxy from Imperial rule." Morrison felt the weight of those words. He had come to this galaxy seeking sanctuary for his people, but instead he had found a war that would define the future of every species in the region. The USS Defiance was no longer just a refugee ship. It had become a symbol of hope for the oppressed and a target for the Empire's wrath. "Then we better not disappoint them," Morrison replied, his voice carrying the determination that had carried humanity across the stars. The massive alien fleet filled the space around the USS Defiance like a swarm of deadly insects. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge watching hundreds of enemy vessels take positions in a perfect sphere around his ship. The aliens had learned from their first encounter and were not taking any chances with the strange human vessel. "Captain, I'm counting over 300 ships," reported Amy Foster from her sensor station. "They've got us completely surrounded," Morrison nodded grimly. The alien fleet was unlike anything humanity had ever faced. Their ships moved in perfect formation, each one precisely positioned to maximize their combined firepower. It was clear that these beings had been practicing coordinated fleet warfare for a very long time. "Any communication attempts?" he asked. "Multiple transmissions on various frequencies," replied the communications officer. "But we still can't understand their language. The computer is trying to find patterns, but it's going to take time." Morrison watched as the alien ships began to glow with building energy. Their weapons were powering up again, but this time they were taking no chances. Every ship in the fleet was preparing to fire simultaneously, creating a devastating barrage that would overwhelm even the Defiance's powerful shields. "All hands, brace for impact," Morrison ordered over the ship's intercom. "This is going to be rough." The alien fleet opened fire all at once. Space erupted in brilliant light as hundreds of energy beams converged on the human battleship. The Defiance's shields flared bright blue as they absorbed the massive energy discharge. The deck shook violently under Morrison's feet as the ship's defensive systems strained to handle the overwhelming attack. "Shield strength down to 40%, Commander Lisa Rodriguez called out from the tactical station. "They're focusing all their fire on specific sections, trying to create weak points." Morrison realized the aliens had adapted their tactics based on the first battle. Instead of spreading their fire across the entire shield surface, they were concentrating their attacks to punch through the human defenses. It was a smart strategy that showed these beings were quick learners. "Return fire," Morrison ordered. "Target their command ships," the Defiance responded with everything it had. Missiles streaked out in all directions while the main guns fired massive projectiles at the largest alien vessels. The human weapons carved through the enemy formation, but for every ship they damaged, 10 more took its place. "We're barely scratching them," Rodriguez reported. "Their fleet is too large and they're maintaining safe distances." Morrison knew they were fighting a losing battle. The alien numbers were simply too great, and their coordinated tactics were negating the human advantages in weapon technology. The Defiance was powerful, but it was still just one ship against an entire fleet. "Captain," Dr. Helen Park called out from her science station, "I'm detecting something unusual. There are other ships in the system, but they're not part of the main fleet." Morrison looked at the tactical display where new contacts were appearing. These ships were different from the sleek alien vessels that surrounded them. They were smaller, more angular, and they seemed to be hiding behind asteroids and debris fields. "Are they hostile?" Morrison asked. "Unknown," Park replied. "But they're not participating in the attack. They seem to be watching from a distance." The battle continued to rage around them. The alien fleet maintained their coordinated bombardment, while the Defiance fought back with desperate determination. The human ship's shields were failing under the constant pressure, and it was only a matter of time before they collapsed completely. "Captain, incoming transmission," the communications officer announced. "It's not from the main fleet." Morrison frowned. "Put it through." A new voice filled the bridge, speaking in broken but understandable English. "Human ship, this is Captain Zara of the Zolani Resistance. We have been monitoring your battle. Your enemy is also our enemy." Morrison felt a surge of hope. The mysterious ships hiding in the system were not neutral observers. They were rebels fighting against the same aliens who had attacked the Defiance. "This is Captain Morrison," he replied. "We're not looking for a fight, but these aliens attacked us without provocation. The Galactic Empire attacks all who do not submit to their rule," Zara's voice replied. "We have been fighting them for many years, but we are weak compared to their fleets. Your ship has weapons we have never seen before." Morrison realized they had stumbled into a much larger conflict. The aliens attacking them were not just a single species defending their territory. They were part of a vast empire that ruled this region of space, and there were others who opposed their rule. "Can you help us?" Morrison asked. "We have ships hidden throughout the system," Zara replied. "If you can break through their formation, we can provide cover for your escape." Morrison looked at the tactical display. The alien fleet was still hammering his shields, but they were focused entirely on the Defiance. If the resistance ships could create a distraction, it might be possible to punch through the enemy formation. "All hands, prepare for emergency acceleration," Morrison ordered. "We're going to make a run for it." The Defiance suddenly changed course, accelerating directly toward the thickest part of the alien formation. The enemy ships were caught off guard by the unexpected maneuver. Their perfectly coordinated formation began to break apart. As they tried to track the rapidly moving human vessel. At the same moment, the resistance ships emerged from hiding. They opened fire on the alien fleet from multiple directions, creating chaos in the enemy ranks. The aliens found themselves caught between the powerful human battleship and the guerrilla attacks of the resistance fighters. "Shields at 15%, Rodriguez reported. "But we're breaking through their formation." Morrison watched as the alien ships scattered before the Defiance's charge. The human vessel's momentum carried it through the enemy fleet like a battering ram, its massive hull shrugging off glancing blows from the alien weapons. "Clear of the main formation," Ben Clark announced from the navigation station. "Setting course for the outer system." The Defiance fled toward the edge of the star system, with the resistance ships providing cover. The alien fleet regrouped quickly, but their perfect coordination had been broken. They had learned that the humans were not just another primitive species to be conquered. Morrison realized that everything had changed. They were no longer alone in hostile space. They had found allies in their fight for survival, and they had demonstrated that the mighty galactic empire was not invincible. The war for freedom in this galaxy had just begun. The bridge of the USS Defiance erupted into controlled chaos as battle stations sounded throughout the ship. Captain Jake Morrison gripped the command chair as his crew prepared for what might be their final fight. The alien vessels had formed a perfect attack formation around the human battleship, their sleek hulls gleaming under the light of distant stars. "Shields at maximum power," reported Commander Lisa Rodriguez from the tactical station. "All weapon systems are online and ready to fire on your command." Morrison watched the alien ships through the main viewport. They moved with a grace that human vessels could never match, flowing through space like predators circling their prey. Their hulls were smooth and curved, with no visible armor plating or defensive systems that human engineers would recognize. "Captain, they're powering up some kind of energy weapons," Amy Foster called out from her sensor station. "I'm reading." Massive power buildup across their entire fleet. The lead alien vessel suddenly blazed with brilliant light as energy beams lanced out toward the Defiance. Morrison felt the deck shake under his feet as the first shots struck their shields. The energy weapons created beautiful but deadly streams of plasma that hammered against the human ship's defensive barriers. "Shield strength down to 85%, Rodriguez announced. "Their weapons are more powerful than expected, but our shields are holding." Morrison had expected the first strike to be devastating. Human military doctrine assumed that any advanced alien civilization would have weapons far superior to their own. Instead, the alien energy beams seemed to spread their damage across the entire shield surface rather than concentrating on weak points. "Return fire," Morrison ordered. "Target their lead vessel." The Defiance responded with a thunderous barrage from its main guns. Massive kinetic projectiles streaked through space at incredible velocity, each one carrying the destructive power of a small nuclear weapon. The alien ship tried to evade, but the human targeting systems had calculated its trajectory perfectly. The projectiles struck the alien vessel's hull with tremendous force. Morrison expected to see the ship explode or at least suffer major damage. Instead, the alien hull absorbed the impact with barely visible scarring. Their technology was clearly different from human engineering, but it was not necessarily superior. "Minimal damage to the target," Rodriguez reported. "Their hull seems to be designed to absorb kinetic impacts." The battle continued as both sides tested each other's capabilities. The alien ships fired coordinated energy bursts that lit up space like a deadly light show. The Defiance responded with missiles and projectile weapons that human engineers had perfected over centuries of warfare. Dr. Helen Park worked frantically at her science station, analyzing the alien technology with every sensor the ship possessed. "Captain, their energy weapons are incredibly efficient, but they seem to have no experience with kinetic warfare. They're trying to use anti-energy defenses against our solid projectiles." Morrison realized they had stumbled into a fundamental difference in military philosophy. The aliens had developed their weapons and defenses based on energy-based warfare, while humans had always relied on kinetic weapons and layered defensive systems. Neither side was prepared for the other's approach to combat. "Target their weapon systems," Morrison ordered. "Let's see how they handle precision strikes." The Defiance launched a spread of guided missiles, each one equipped with advanced targeting systems and explosive warheads. The alien ships tried to intercept them with energy beams, but the missiles were designed to survive such attacks. They wove through the defensive fire and struck home against the alien weapon arrays. Several of the alien vessels suddenly went dark as their primary weapons were destroyed. Morrison watched with satisfaction as the enemy formation began to break up. The aliens had clearly never faced an opponent who could disable their weapons without destroying their entire ships. "They're falling back," reported Ben Clark from the navigation station. "The entire fleet is retreating to a safe distance." Morrison allowed himself a moment of relief. They had survived the first encounter, but this was clearly just the beginning. The aliens would regroup and return with better tactics, and the Defiance was alone in hostile space with no backup or support. "Damage report," he called out. Tony Williams' voice came over the intercom from the engineering section. "Shield generators are strained but functional. We lost 2-point defense turrets and suffered some hull scoring, but nothing critical." "The main systems are all operational?" Morrison nodded grimly. They had gotten off lightly in the first exchange, but luck would not carry them through an extended campaign. The alien ships were faster and more maneuverable than the Defiance, and they clearly had numerical superiority. "Captain," Amy Foster's voice was urgent, "I'm detecting massive energy signatures approaching from the inner system." "More ships." "Lots of them." Morrison felt his heart sink as new contacts appeared on the tactical display. The alien reinforcements numbered in the hundreds, a massive fleet that dwarfed anything humanity had ever assembled. The retreating ships had clearly called for backup, and now the full might of the alien military was bearing down on the lone human vessel. "How long until they reach us?" he asked. "At current speed, approximately 6 hours, Ben replied. Morrison looked around the bridge at his crew. These men and women had followed him across the galaxy, trusting him to lead them to safety. Now they faced impossible odds against an enemy they didn't understand. The weight of 8,000 lives pressed down on his shoulders. "All senior staff to the conference room," he ordered. "We need to discuss our options." The meeting was brief and grim. The tactical situation was clear to everyone. The Defiance could not fight an entire alien fleet and expect to survive. They needed to find another solution, or everyone aboard would die in the coming battle. "What about trying to communicate again?" suggested Dr. Helen Park. "Maybe we can negotiate some kind of ceasefire." "They fired on us without provocation," Rodriguez pointed out. "I don't think they're interested in talking." Morrison considered their options. They could try to run, but the alien ships were faster and knew the local space better. They could try to hide, but the Defiance was too large to conceal effectively. Fighting seemed like suicide, but surrender might be worse. "We fight," he decided finally, "but we do it smart. We use every advantage we have, and we make them pay for every inch of space." The crew returned to their stations as the massive alien fleet approached. Morrison stood on the bridge. watching the stars and preparing for the battle that would determine the fate of the last humans in the galaxy. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, watching the stars blur past through the massive viewport. 3 years had passed since the ship jumped into hyperspace, fleeing the burning wreckage of Earth's outer colonies. 3 years of searching for a new home while carrying 8,000 survivors in the belly of humanity's most powerful battleship. The ship groaned around him as it pushed through the endless darkness of space. Chief Engineer Tony Williams had done miracles keeping the massive vessel running, but even miracles had limits. Food supplies were getting low, and the crew was tired from constant travel through unknown regions of space. "Captain, we're picking up something strange ahead," called out Lieutenant Amy Foster from her station at the sensor array. Her voice carried the exhaustion that had become common among the crew. "There's some kind of spatial anomaly blocking our path." Morrison walked over to examine the readings on her screen. The numbers made no sense to him, but he had learned to trust his crew's expertise during their long journey. The anomaly appeared as a swirling mass of energy that stretched across several light years, completely blocking their intended course. "Can we go around it?" he asked. "It would take us 6 months to navigate around the outer edge," replied Navigation Officer Ben Clark from his position near the helm. "We don't have the fuel reserves for that kind of detour." Morrison nodded grimly. The Defiance was designed for long-range operations, but even its massive fuel tanks had limits. They had been rationing energy for months, keeping only essential systems online to extend their range. Going around the anomaly would mean certain death for everyone aboard. "What about going through it?" he asked. The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew that jumping through unknown spatial phenomena was extremely dangerous. Ships had been lost attempting such maneuvers in the past, vanishing without a trace into the cosmic void. Chief Science Officer Dr. Helen Park spoke up from her station. "The readings are unlike anything in our databases. The energy patterns suggest it might be some kind of natural wormhole, but the stability is questionable at best." Morrison looked around at his crew. These men and women had followed him across the galaxy, trusting him to lead them to safety. They had lost friends, family, and their entire civilization to the alien attack that destroyed their home system. Now they faced another impossible choice. "How long until we reach the anomaly?" he asked. 12 hours at current speed," Ben replied. Morrison took a deep breath. "All hands, prepare for emergency jump protocols. We're going through." The next several hours passed in tense preparation. Engineering teams worked frantically to reinforce the ship's hull and stabilize the hyperspace drive. Medical teams prepared for casualties, while security forces ensured that all civilian areas were properly sealed against potential hull breaches. As the ship approached the anomaly, the energy readings grew stronger. The bridge lights flickered as electromagnetic interference from the phenomenon began affecting the ship's systems. Through the viewport, Morrison could see the anomaly growing larger, its swirling energies creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. "All stations report." "Ready," announced Commander Lisa Rodriguez, the ship's tactical officer. She had been Morrison's right hand throughout their journey, handling the military aspects of their mission while he dealt with the broader challenges of leadership. "Take us in," Morrison ordered. The Defiance plunged into the anomaly. Reality seemed to bend around them as space and time twisted in impossible ways. The ship's hull screamed under stresses that no human engineer had ever calculated. Emergency lights bathed the bridge in red as multiple systems failed. Simultaneously, Morrison felt his consciousness stretch and compress as they passed through the phenomenon. Time moved strangely, moments feeling like hours while hours compressed into seconds. The crew held onto their stations as the ship shook violently, threatening to tear itself apart. Then suddenly, they emerged into normal space. The stars that greeted them were completely unfamiliar. The constellations that had guided humanity for millennia were gone, replaced by alien patterns that spoke of vast distances traveled. Morrison realized they had crossed not just space, but potentially entire galactic regions. "Damage report," he called out as the crew began recovering from the traumatic passage. "Hull integrity at 92%. reported Tony Williams over the intercom. Several minor breaches in the outer sections, but nothing critical. We lost some sensor arrays and the secondary communication dish, but the main systems are intact. Morrison felt a wave of relief wash over him. They had survived the passage, though at considerable cost. The ship would need repairs, but they were alive and in one piece. "Captain," Amy Foster's voice was tight with concern. "I'm detecting multiple contacts on long-range sensors. Large vessels, unknown configuration, and they're moving to intercept us." Morrison's relief evaporated instantly. After 3 years of isolation, they had finally encountered other intelligent life. The question was whether these aliens would be friendly or hostile. "How many ships?" he asked. 15 vessels, all larger than our escort frigates but smaller than the Defiance. They're maintaining formation and approaching at high speed. Morrison watched the tactical display as the alien vessels closed the distance. Their ships were sleek and elegant, with curved hulls that seemed to flow like liquid metal. They moved with precision that spoke of advanced technology and military discipline. "Are they trying to communicate?" he asked. "Multiple transmission attempts on various frequencies," reported the communications officer, "but nothing we can translate. The patterns don't match any known language protocols." Morrison made a decision that would change the course of history. "Open a channel on all frequencies. Let's see if we can establish contact." The alien fleet continued its approach, now close enough that individual ship details were visible on the main screen. Morrison could see weapon ports along their hulls, though nothing was currently powered up. The lead vessel was significantly larger than the others, probably a command ship. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human vessel USS Defiance," he broadcast. "We come in peace, seeking safe passage through your space. We mean no harm to you or your people." The response came immediately. The alien ship suddenly changed formation, spreading out in a classic attack pattern. Energy readings spiked as their weapon systems came online, targeting the human battleship from multiple angles. Morrison realized with growing dread that first contact was not going according to plan. The aliens had interpreted their arrival as an act of aggression, and now 8,000 human lives hung in the balance. The Defiance found itself alone in hostile space, facing an unknown enemy with superior numbers and home field advantage. "All hands, battle stations," Morrison ordered. "Prepare for combat."